Welcome to Wednesday, the 22nd day of November 2023, your day weather podcast being brought to you by Hot Springs County Travel and Tourism, reminding you that as the temperatures drop and snow is on the horizon at Thermopolis, you can always find yourself in some nice hot water. Well, we've got a nice day, but the storm is still on the way. So this shot here from near Yellowstone Park in late October, going to be a familiar scene here as ice and snow is going to cover a large portion of the Intermountain West. We have a nice day, though, coming on up. If you're headed out today, you're not going to have any problems. It's really going to be delightful. Temperatures in many areas will be reaching the 60s today, but don't be fooled. We've got very good model agreement. I know that we were kind of picking on the models a week ago at this time, and for good reason, but we really have good agreement on the overall weather pattern. So our confidence is very high. And one reason our confidence is very high is this is a pattern we've seen before. A lot of the mystery is in the history of weather. And so we've seen these patterns where you have the collision of air mass, Pacific air over Arctic air. It's just it's an easy layup. So we're going to see an Arctic surge come in overnight tonight into Thursday morning into the northern areas. And that's where the weather is going to be noticed the most by sunrise tomorrow. The cold and snow will start in far southern Montana. A lot of Montana is just going to be cold. Only southern Montana really sees the snow. But then that snow spreads into Wyoming during the course of the day tomorrow and just works its way south Thursday into Friday. And we're still going to see lingering, at least light snows throughout Saturday across portions of central southern Wyoming, Colorado, down into New Mexico, parts of Kansas, into the Texas Panhandle. So we've got travel concerns on all the major interstates in the west, all the way down to Interstate 40 into New Mexico and Texas. Of course, all the mountain passes as well, as this system will get on both sides of the divide. By Sunday, we're back to dry weather. So Sunday is going to be really cold, but travel weather conditions will be improving Sunday. What we've got to watch Sunday and Monday will be areas of blowing snow. That's something we'll address later this week. This is going to be a good cold snap that's going to go well into early next week, so be ready for some cold weather, just not for a day or two. Also, we're planning to send an update tomorrow morning, so tomorrow morning we'll update on anything new and fine-tune the forecast a little bit more. Also, at the end of this podcast, we're going to talk about the latest El Nino update. Beautiful shot yesterday, beautiful November weather. We're going to have another day like this great shot. Thanks, David, for sending this in. Out of Buena Vista, Colorado. Snow on the high country, those high clouds and blue sky making for a beautiful scene. Now, I'm showing you a little bit of a different perspective in the satellite imagery this morning because part of the weather that we'll be experiencing is really showing up if you look closely on the satellite image that's taking more of an eastern perspective. See the swirl of clouds over Hudson Bay? That's that big spinning area of low pressure, the vortex of low pressure and very cold air right over Hudson Bay. And you see this area of blue clouds? These are low clouds associated with the Arctic air. And if you look at these clouds very closely up here, you see how they're moving due south? So the Arctic air is already spinning around the low and advancing south. Now, look how far away it is. But it's going to cover a lot of ground today and overnight tonight into tomorrow morning. So we've got the Canadian feature and the Arctic air up here in the higher latitudes. Then you can see the moisture feeding in from the Pacific. So the Arctic meets the Pacific, and the Pacific moisture causing a lot of Lehigh clouds there off the front range of the mountains near Cody, through the western areas of the Bighorn Basin, high mid-level clouds, that Pacific moisture causing wave clouds there in Montana, and northern Wyoming, clear skies elsewhere. So there's the big low up over Hudson Bay. Here's a nice area of high pressure giving us the nice weather today. So this is today, but this is by Friday. So you can see there's quite a bit of change. And this is where we have the Arctic air and the Pacific moisture colliding. And all of our three major models, the European, the GFS, the American model, the Canadian model, are all basically the same. I'm showing you the European model right here. It's just going to be fine details now that we need to sort out. So this is by Friday. By Sunday, the trough comes through, but notice the winds aloft on Sunday as the jet stream rides are still coming in from the north. So the door to Canada is going to be open through the weekend and early next week. That's why it's going to be prolonged cold. This is currently where the National Weather Service across the U.S. is entered into winter weather advisories, winter storm warnings, winter storm watches. You can see a large part of Montana, eastern Idaho, northern Nevada here, the northern Wasatch Front, then just about all of Wyoming, then into western Nebraska. Now, Colorado should get into the act with advisories and watches later. Don't quite know why they're not in place yet, but they will later on. And also we'll talk about why isn't there anything at the moment for south central Wyoming. And we'll talk about why that is here in a minute. And you can see that hole. We have just about all of Wyoming except the northeast corner here and the south central under either a winter weather advisory in the purple or a winter storm watch in the dark blue. And that really has to do with where the Arctic air gets the deepest and where that collision of air masses will be the best. This looks a lot like what we showed you yesterday. This graphic begins late tonight and early tomorrow morning, and you can see the southward progression of the precipitation all the way down there into Texas. This last image goes all the way through Sunday morning. So really, for this entire system, starts late tonight and early tomorrow morning, and for parts of the west continues all the way into Sunday morning, at least down there into New Mexico, Texas, and the far south. So it's the same situation. As the Arctic air spreads south, collides with the Pacific moisture, you can see where the heavier precipitation is going to be in the blue and the yellow. The blue areas is where the snowfall is likely going to be upwards to 6 inches or more. We're likely going to have some areas that are going to exceed 10, 12 inches right into this area here where the darker blue is. Also notice the darker blue right along the front range of the I-25 corridor as upslope winds and the deeper Arctic air stacks right up against it. But you'll notice, and we'll zoom in a little bit more, that there's an area right here that doesn't have as much potential. And that's because the Arctic air just can't quite get into those areas at the same time the Pacific moisture arrives. So it's just not a good timing situation. And really this is terrain based. And you can see that in the snowfall forecast right here. Basically, the Arctic air can't get up into that higher terrain in time to meet the best Pacific moisture. But certainly the best collision of the deeper air mass is going to be in this area here. But also look at this area here in northeast and east central Colorado into southwest Kansas. That's going to be causing a lot of icy roads and highways along I-70, I-76, and I-80 right there. Also notice that, and we'll go into zoom it in a little bit closer. But for the entire Intermountain West, especially Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, parts of Nebraska, Kansas, northern New Mexico, it's going to be very wintry. And there you can see that this also is going to extend later in the weekend with some snows going through Chicago, through Detroit, through Des Moines here, along Interstate 80, just enough to make it really icy, then across parts of New England there. So, having some fun with Oprah. Most of the Intermountain West, everyone's going to be getting a winter storm. Now, focusing in a little bit closer, we can show you some of these areas where the terrain and the pattern don't sync up the best. That will be in the upper Green River Basin. There's going to be a little bit of a snow shadow there because of the Wind River Mountains. But look at the Wind Rivers. Lander, South Pass going to get a lot of snow. But on the other side, Pinedale and Cora and Big Piney, you're not going to get as much. There's also another area right here in Carbon County into North Park, Colorado. And the reason is the Arctic air, there's a lot of very high terrain here. Just can't get in. It just not gets in deep enough. It's still going to snow. It's still going to be icy. But it's not going to be as much as areas just on the other side of the mountain ranges here. Also notice far northeastern Wyoming, you're not in that best boundary situation as well. Also, that best boundary situation is just north of Rapid City, but Rapid City gets into the action as well. Very cold. We talked about prolonged cold. This is for the 7-day period from Friday through next Friday. So you can see a lot of the 48 going to be much, much colder. Canada, relative to average, is going to be warmer than average. It doesn't mean it's going to be warm in Canada. It just means a little bit above average. The cold is displaced. That's why the anomaly is so strong here in the U.S., because the colder air is getting displaced out of Canada. A quick El Nino update. This is where we are right now. El Nino, very robust, reaching its peak, really, and reminder of where we were a year ago with La Nina. Look at that change in just 12 months. We also have these warm waters in the North Pacific, which again is a cold signal heading into December. And the latest forecast, this is where we are right now. We're still falling short of where we were. Well fall short where we were in 15 and 16. Still a little bit short of where we were into 9. So as we talked about, yes, this is a strong El Nino, but not a super El Nino. And notice the latest graphic. I want you to look at the purple line. It shows El Nino is reaching its peak right now through January and February. Then El Nino weakens by late winter and into spring, goes into neutral status by summer. So we're in the peak period of El Nino over the next 60 days. And you can see that on the forecast, how we're 100% chance of El Nino, but really beginning to see it weaken rather rapidly, sometime spring towards early summer. Have yourself a good Wednesday. Safe travels. We'll update you tomorrow.